before we get into this one, I just wanted to say something, because I listened to the podcast that I recorded on the way walking home from the park, and I had 3 little things that come into my head. So the first one is, during this podcast I talk about the gut feeling and how I see 2 different types of gut feelings as like ripples. And what I thought to myself was, the first one I talk about, I see it as like ripples going through space. So it's like you get the gut feeling as you're walking through the ripples in physical space. The other one is very much like the gut feeling is like ripples going through time. So you're feeling the ripples as you're going through time. I thought that was quite interesting. And then the other thing is, that kind of looks a bit like the, because during this podcast I talk about, that's quite funny. I talk about how I see it as like a sheet of paper, but it's somehow 3D, very much like a hologram. And I sort of see the ripples as the same way. So like the ripples are going, if it's 2D, it's going through space. If it's the 3D, it's going through time. But really, those ripples would only be going through the sheet of paper. So that's it. I just wanted to add that in. And I hope you enjoyed this one. Let's get into this one. Hello, this is Sophie Lawson from sophielawson.com. And this is episode 224 of the Sophie Art Podcast. It's a little podcast I do about the art and things. And the sun is shining today. It's early in the morning. And I'm walking around the park. So this is a little walk and talk. And today I'm going to be talking about the gut feeling. I want to try and just trying to talk about what I think it might be and stuff. So lilDENNiS is at home, chilling out. He's enjoying the indoors lately. Well, the thing is, it's been very sunny lately, but I found myself almost like trapped indoors, which is a bit of a shame because I want to be outside enjoying the sun. But I've got so many things I'm doing at the minute. One of the things that's happened is I had a sort of, I've never really thought about what is the gut feeling. You know that feeling you get when there's different sort of versions of it. One of them is when you walk into a room or something and you can feel, let's say like somebody's been having an argument or something. It's almost like you can actually feel the argument in the air. Even though you don't know there's been an argument, somehow you can feel the argument. So that's like one sort of gut feeling. And my thinking about that is, what's happened there is, when people are interacting with each other, they're creating energy. So either you're feeling that energy, which is sort of being, I almost see energy as like ripples in an ocean. So like once you've thrown a stone in, I saw that the other day. I was standing on a bridge and I threw a stone off the bridge into the water, and what I noticed was the ripples were there for about 3 minutes, and you could even see very faint ripples. Like I thought all the ripples had gone, but when I looked closely, the ripples were still there, like very faint rings of ripples. So what I'm thinking is, if everything's energy, when people are interacting with each other, let's say there's a massive argument, that must be like throwing a massive boulder into the ocean. So what happens is, when you walk into the room, it's almost like you're walking through the ripples, so you're feeling the ripples. And I think what's happened is there's a part of you, because you don't realise what it is, because you're not, our senses, we're not trained to know what some of our senses are, I think. So we're like feeling that, but we're not, we just feel it, but we're not sure what it is. So I very much like, I said this on another podcast a few weeks ago, I feel like thoughts are very much the same thing. So if somebody has a thought, well, I've wondered whether everyone's thoughts are sort of radiating out of us. Again, very much like ripples. So as we're walking past people, we're sort of like feeling the ripples of the people, as these thoughts are like invisible energy things that we're going through. So I wondered whether there must be a way to be able to see if this is true, that like an argument creates an energy, and we're walking through the energy of this argument. There must be a way to create some sort of device or something, or even maybe train your mind or something, to be able to visually see these energies. And I also wonder whether they're at different colours, because Dan from the Ascend podcast says spirits latch onto you. Basically everyone's emotional state in the spirit realm, it's displayed as colours. There's a swing here, like massive, looks like a seat from a racing car. That'd be quite cool. See, part of me wants to get into that, but I don't know whether I'd be able to get out of it. These swings are quite high. I feel like somebody's messed about with these swings. Yeah, these swings are way too high. Somebody's messed about with these swings. I don't know what I was going to say then. But that's not actually the gut feeling I want to talk about. The gut feeling I want to talk about is the one where, an example I've got is, let's say you walk into a shop or something and there's a book there. Well, no, this one. What about this one? You've watched a YouTube video or something, and somebody's said this art book is amazing. So what happens now is you really want to find this art book. So in your head you're thinking, I want to find this art book. This gut feeling very much is linked in with synchronicities. And what happens is, you walk down the street and you'll walk past a shop, and something inside of your belly, like a gut feeling, it will say go in that shop. You've got no reason to go into that shop. You'll walk into the shop, and in the shop will be the book that you were looking for. Like a second-hand shop, it will have the book you were looking for. So it feels like a synchronicity. So you think to yourself, in that moment, well, I've never really thought about this before, but I've started thinking, what is it that's created that gut feeling? There's another example. Let's say you're looking for let's say you're a treasure hunter or something, and you're going around like the desert, and the gut feeling says, start digging here. You've got no reason to do it, but this gut feeling says, start digging here. Now you've got free will to either start digging or just to ignore it and walk on. So what happens is, you ignore it, you walk on, somebody else behind you gets the same, well, I don't know, somebody else behind you starts digging there for some reason, and they unearth like a treasure worth £1 million. So now inside of you there's a feeling of, oh, if only I'd listened to that gut feeling. So it's almost like in that moment you would wish you could somehow reverse time, go back in time and start digging, because you'd be the one to find the little treasure. So I've never thought about this before, but I started thinking about what if, I think I talked about this on a podcast a couple of weeks ago. It's to do with that double slit experiment in the quantum physics. What happens, what they've found out is that particles are, I don't know if it's particles, is it? I can't remember what it is, but something is like a particle and a wave at the same time. In other words, it's both physical and like just a possibility. But it's only when you look at it that it becomes a physical thing. But what happens is, if you look at it, if they observe it in the future, well, the moment they observe it, it becomes physical in the past. So it's almost as if somehow the observer in the future is creating a physical object in the past. It's very cool, but it's very hard to get your head around it. And I still can't quite understand how they can work out that it's not. I still can't quite work out how they know that it's only the observer that is creating it as a physical thing. But they must have done the experiments. So that's what they're saying. So I'm thinking, what if? Because basically quantum physics is like, at the moment, the foundations of everything, physical. So because we're physical, it's got to be part of us as well. So I'm wondering whether, because in a strange way, if you think about it, that observer, all that is a consciousness. As soon as a consciousness observes it, it becomes physical. So if no consciousness ever observes it, all those particles are going to stay as possibilities. So what I started thinking was, what if in the future, when you've not listened to the gut feeling, and what's happened is you've got such a sort of a feeling of almost like regret, but it's such a strong and emotional feeling that it actually sends a signal backwards in time to yourself, because you're like trying to basically change the timeline. You're sort of thinking, oh, I wish I'd listened to that gut feeling. But that is that feeling of, I wish I'd listened to that gut feeling, that has actually created the gut feeling. Because the gut feeling is actually you. It's you in the future sending a signal to yourself to dig there, only because you didn't dig there. So if you did listen to that gut feeling and start digging there, what sort of happened is you've basically, it's almost like a future you has changed the past. But that future you would still exist, but it would be on a timeline where you didn't start digging. But the version of you that did use your free will to do what the gut feeling said, that one has actually like changed the timeline. But you could also look at it as sort of like a loop, almost as if, I look at it as like a one consciousness. The consciousness goes forwards, it doesn't listen to the gut feeling, so it creates a, it creates the sensation of a gut feeling. So if there's an anime called Steins, which actually explains what I'm trying to explain. But in that, what happens is this bloke is basically travelling through time, But it's not his physicalness that's travelling, it's his consciousness. So in other words, your consciousness could sort of spend 1,000 years in the same human being, because what happens is you go from the age of 5 to 6, you then go backwards back to the age of 5, and you could sort of like keep looping for say 10 years. So you're now really, your consciousness is 15 years old, but your body is still only 5. It's sort of like that. So in a strange way, there's only one consciousness going through your experience, but it's almost like going up and down. But then I had another thought the other day, which I thought this was brilliant. I thought, what if? So if you ever listen to Divine Truth with AJ, he talks about, basically the whole point of everything is, what happens is when we die, we go into the spirit realm. Any unresolved issues, we're basically going to have to face them. So the whole point of it is to try and face them whilst you're a human, so that when you go into the spirit realm, you're actually like higher up the dimensions. Because the higher up the dimensions you are, the closer you are to what he calls being at one with God. But you could basically call it free from issue. Like basically you would be completely in balance. You would have no unresolved issues, which is one of the things that I got. One of the things I felt in when I did my psychedelic experience. I got that feeling that the whole point of being here is with the numbers 369. 3 is process, which you can look at as being a human. 6 is out of balance. And if you're out of balance, it's almost like the out of balance is what would keep you looping. So that's what could keep you doing your creating gut feelings, to try and basically get yourself into a 9. So that's what he's saying. And at some point you become what he calls at one with God. Because what he says is, what you really are is 2 halves of a creature, and the 2 halves splits itself into a masculine and a feminine energy. But it doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't necessarily mean it's a female and a male. It could be 2 females, but they become soulmates, and one is more masculine, one is more feminine. And the whole point is both of these halves have to find balance, and then what happens then is they become one. So it's like you're sort of moving up the dimensions. So I thought to myself, what if what's actually happening is that gut feeling? Because the other thing is, once you become at one like that, once you become one, like the higher up the dimensions you go in, you're actually going to get out of time. So it's only in the physical that there's time. So if you're in balance, and what you would call being at one with God, you are outside of the timeline. So if you've ever tried to think about this, getting outside of time, what you can get this, you can feel what it's like. It's really hard to do it, but you can get like a half a second where you feel it, and you can feel that all of time would exist and no time as well. It's very strange, but in that moment you can actually see how once you're outside of time, you could sort of, I was going to say like manipulate, but you would basically see all of the possibilities. And I almost see it as like some sort of hologram. It's like a 2D, it's like a sheet of paper which is somehow like 3D. So on that sheet of paper you've got all of your possibilities as like little dots, and the consciousness goes through connecting all these dots, but it's actually 3D. So what happens is it's like the timeline is this is how you can end up with thousands of different versions of the same person, basically. But there's only really one consciousness going through all of these versions. It's one of those things, I can see it in my head, but I can't really explain it. So what I was thinking was, if you're at one with God, at that point you're still you, but you're not you anymore, because in other words, it's like you're still going to be, I would still be Sophie, or I'd still be this human, because I'm inside of it, because time has to exist whilst I'm here. So I'm here, but I'm not here, because really time doesn't exist. So what happens here is, you've got the gut feeling would be you outside of time, looking at yourself inside of the time, with the ability to see basically the exit point where you can become who you really are. So because you want to become that, what happens is you can almost like watch the consciousness go through the system, and you'll see it approaching. Hey, I've stood on something here. That's quite dangerous. There's like a piece of something's got stuck in my shoe here. Like a piece of metal. That's quite dangerous, that is. There's a piece of metal with spikes in a park, in a kid's park. That's mental, that is. I might put it at the bottom of the slide. No. Put it in the bin. Where's the bin gone? What happened here? So what it is the gut feeling is actually you looking at your timeline, trying to help yourself, become yourself. But what's so sort of paradoxical about this is, if that is what's happening, then you already are you. So this is why it's quite strange. In a way, it doesn't actually matter. It doesn't matter how long it takes you to become at one with God, or to become completely and utterly free from issues. It doesn't matter how long that takes, because you've already done it. It's very strange. But for me, there's definitely something with these gut feelings. Because everyone feels it, and it must be something. It can't just be, something must be creating these gut feelings. So I feel like it's either you in the future having a super strong reaction. Because another one is, imagine you're looking for a house to buy or something. You walk into this house and the gut feeling says this is the one. So you get that, and then that becomes like the best place you've ever lived in, and you're happy there for the rest of your life or something. Well, imagine if you hadn't listened to that gut feeling. Can you see how you would end up on a timeline where you might be thinking, oh, I wish I took that house. And it's that would create the gut feeling. But I like the other one better, because where it's actually you in the future, when you've like resolved all your issues, looking at yourself, trying to help yourself. Because what happens there is, I look at that as if that, almost to me, what AJ from Divine Truth would call at one with God, all that is it's your higher self. And this is the thing I'm starting to notice, is everyone's talking about the same thing, they're using different labels, that's all it is. Oh, I've got this other thought as well. It's unrelated, but it's just to do with labels. I should do a podcast about this really, but what it is I was thinking, why is anyone called transgender? The only reason someone's called transgender is because society wants to fit people into boxes. So if you've got a bloke who's more feminine, or a bloke who feels more at peace wearing female clothes, presenting as female. What happens there is, because society can't put that into the box of male, it has to create a new box called transgender. It's almost like they created the word transgender just so that they could keep the illusion of separation going. Because if you had that bloke existed wherein he was like presenting more feminine, it would make people question gender, and it would make people realise, in the end you would realise that actually everyone's the same. There is no real separation between male and female, apart from you've obviously got like the biological Willie and Fanny but what I mean is the actual feeling, the essence of it. There's nothing separating it. So I started wondering whether that was all these labels and everything, it's just to separate everything. And there's another one I had this thought as well yesterday. I feel like this is something else that came to me in my psychedelic experience. I think the reason that the universe or God or truth, I think the reason truth uses the truth speaks. The language of truth is numbers and symbols. And the reason for that is the number 2 is always going to be the number 2. Whereas the word 2 can mean different things. So like the word 2 has got 3 different meanings. You've got the word 2 could be talking about the number 2. 2 could be I'm sending this letter to someone. Or 2 could be like us two, like 2 people. So if you use the word 2, there's an element of confusion because you've got to actually use other words to describe so that you can understand what the word 2 means. Whereas if you use the number 2, that's it, you know what the number 2 is. And it's the same with symbols and shapes and stuff. Like a circle is a circle. So I feel like that's why truth is always represented as numbers and symbols. So I think that's it for this one. What I'm doing now is, every time I get that gut feeling, I'm actually trying to feel it. I want to really feel it. But the other thing is, I'm trying more to respond to the gut feeling because I've had too many experiences lately where I get a gut feeling. Because what happens is, you get a gut feeling, it's almost like you've got to sort of think without you've got to act without thinking. That's what a gut feeling is. A gut feeling requires you to act without thinking. Because if you get a gut feeling and you start thinking, it's like you're letting the mind in. As soon as the words in your head start coming in, and what will happen is they'll start trying to make sense of this gut feeling, but it will also, what I've noticed, it will start finding loads of reasons to not go with the gut feeling. So again, it feels like there's 2 energies going on. You've got the energy of the gut feeling, which requires you to just act without thinking. But what happens is, at least for me, I'll let the mind come in. And as soon as the mind comes in, it's almost like you start to drift further and further away from going with the gut feeling. So what this also requires is an element of trust. Trust with the gut feelings. That's it. I don't think I've got a quote for this one. There's a bag of crisps on the floor. Let's see if we can find a quote. Hey, have you ever had knickknacks? I love knickknacks. They're lovely. Hey, I like this one. This week's inspirational quote. Snacks can be enjoyed as part of a balanced diet and healthy lifestyle, including regular exercise. That's cool, isn't it? This week's inspirational quote. Snacks can be enjoyed as part of a balanced diet. Hey look, I'm walking home, just coming out of the park. Look what I found. That's probably the other... Oh, actually no, it's not. I was going to say I thought that might be the other pair of sunglasses, but I think it's got a different frame, that.